and to try and keep muted, otherwise to save the feedback getting awful, especially for Rachel in the chamber. Are we okay to start the recording?
Yes, Leader, thanks.
That's great, thanks Rachel. Right, welcome then. First item is attendance. I believe everyone can be logged on the system. Any apologies that we need to note today, please?
None that I'm aware of, thanks.
I don't believe so. I think every cabinet member's here, so that's good. On to item 3, declarations of interest. Delith.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not aware of any interest that have to be declared, but my advice is that if you enter into a debate or ask a question about a particular matter on the agenda, particularly in relation to the financial report, then you can consider whether you have an interest to declare at that time. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, that's great. Just to declare a personal interest as a volunteer for the Fishbond Park group in my ward, and I believe that counts for David Yole as well. So if we can just log that, it's just a personal interest. We do it as ward members, so technically I don't think we have to, but I just think for openness sake, if I can do that, and then I'll bring in Dave Yole as well.
Yep.
Okay, great. If that's logged then.
I only said that once.
Bit of an echo on your line there, Dave, I think. Okay, if we can move then, any other declarations of interest to note? If not, we move on to agenda item 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes of Cabinet on the 23rd of November 2021. Is everyone content with them as an accurate record? Any objections or amendments? If we're happy to pass those by show of hands, then that's great. Okay, if we move on then to an update on actions, anything we need to note here? No, if we're happy with that, then we can move on to agenda item 6, which is the report on financial monitoring from 21-22 and the budget 22-23. And if I initially hand over to Kelly Preston. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Anthony. I'm pleased to provide Cabinet with what I believe is a really positive financial update today. As you can see, the report both provides an update on where we are in terms of the 21-22 budget forecast and looks ahead following receipt of our positive provisional settlement from Welsh Government to 22-23. I'll start by looking at the latest financial monitoring position for the 21-22 budget. As Cabinet will see from the table and detail in the report, the forecast has improved significantly and is showing, based on November's monitoring, a favourable position of just over 2.2 million. There are a number of reasons for this which are detailed in the report, but I think it's clear that the positive and constructive working relationship with Welsh Government, as we have navigated the challenges of the last year, has really helped local authorities. Clearly, this is a monitoring position and this figure might or will likely change a little, but we now need to think about this resource and its potential to deliver on members' priorities. Do we, for instance, look to bolster the COVID Recovery Fund, look to do something around COVID hardship, or look further at the Council's financial resilience? So there's lots of things for us to think and talk about over the next couple of months here. Looking ahead now to 22-23, as you'll be aware, our provisional settlement was very positive with an uplift of 9.3%. I think it's fair to say that this is significantly higher, well, certainly significantly higher than what I expected. And again, I think this is evidence of the ongoing and constructive partnership approach that local authorities have had with Welsh Government during the pandemic. And it also shows that Welsh Government recognise and values the importance of councils in delivering to support our residents and businesses during this difficult time. Before we received our provisional settlement, you'll recall that we were looking at a gap of around 1.5 million. Scrutiny looked at those initial estimates, which also included uplifts in schools, dom care and children's services, and they provided some comments and recommendations for which I'm grateful. In light of the provisional settlement, we will now, of course, continue to reflect upon those comments and recommendations. Following that scrutiny meeting, officers also looked at what mitigations could be identified to address the initial gap. I'm sure Cabinet will be pleased to note that there are no real service changes or cuts proposed here. Now, taking the provisional settlement and the mitigations together, we find ourselves with a positive position of just over 8 million for 22-23. Clearly, this is really good news and a good place for us to be. However, I'll just temper that and say it's important to remember that there's still a lot to work through and consider. For instance, we'll need to consider the cost of the introduction of the real living wage in the care sector, pay negotiations, and also remember that there are currently no plans to continue with the hardship funds into 22-23. We also know from forward indications that things are likely to be tighter in the years ahead. So moving forward, we'll need to continue to work together with officers and take account of the feedback from scrutiny, which I believe is now being held at the beginning of February, as we consider this resource and pull together our final budget proposals ahead of March's Budget Council meeting. I'll just finish by saying that it's really good to be talking in positive terms when it comes to the budget. I am, as always, very grateful to all our finance officers for their continued prudent approach and to all our officers across departments for their continued work on this. So thanks, Anthony. I'll hand over to Nigel now to go through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I mean, there's not a lot, not a lot to add. So I'll just pick out a couple of points. As Kelly has said, the position for 21-22 is looking positive and has certainly improved. I would be expecting that to improve further as we head towards the end of the year. I still feel that Welsh Government do want to support local government and they want to see our resilience improved. So I would endorse what Kelly has said. I think we need to think very carefully at the end of the year what we do with that positive position, and I think Kelly's highlighted the key points. There's no hardship fund going forward, so we need to think about that. You've got your COVID recovery fund, you may want to strengthen that, and obviously the financial resilience of the council. We do need to use this period so that we can really strengthen that financial resilience for the years to come and put Torfaen in a really strong position. But it's a positive picture. The reasons for the variance are all laid out there in the report. In terms of the provisional settlement, I've been working an awful long time in finance. I can't ever remember a settlement like this. It's much more significant than even I would have thought the most optimistic assumptions in the run-up to the provisional settlement. And I think, as Kelly has said, it is evidence of the work that local government has done with Welsh Government over the period of the whole pandemic and pre-pandemic. A range across Wales from 8.4 to 11.2. These are significant numbers. Just a slight note of caution, and I mean it with a little c, not a big C. But there's a lot of narrative coming out through various agencies that Welsh Government support. So there's the Health Authority, etc., that local government has had a good settlement and therefore should be able to do. So I think we just got to be alive to that. We can't deny that. In terms of the scrutiny comments, the only point I'll bring out, the answers are there. I did strengthen the answers around use of reserve funding. As members, you rarely hear me talk about Section 151, but I have referenced it in here, that it will never be my advice to members that you use reserves to underpin recurring spend. It's there for one-off, etc., etc. And it was emerging through scrutiny that may have been an answer. Okay, the settlement has taken that away now, but I just don't think it hurts to just push back a little bit and say that that's not the appropriate use of reserves. In terms of where we are on the budget, as Kelly has said, the mitigations are all doable. They've all been through members before. You've seen them. We've then got the potential headroom. The settlement, as Kelly says, does point to certain things. It does say we should be able to meet the demands of the real living wage within the care sector. I'm sure you as members would want to do that anyway, but we've got to work through that. The pay assumption in the initial estimates is probably too light. We need to up that, and we do need to think about the fact that there will be no hardship funding in 22-23. Now, we all hope the COVID pandemic will be largely behind us by then, but there could still be some implications popping up, whether that's in homelessness, whether that's in social care, whether that's in schools. Pressure just pop up. Welsh Government will be expecting us to manage those. There won't be a hardship fund, and again, I think that's entirely reasonable. But we need to factor it into what we do with this resource. And I think that's all I need to say then, Leader, in addition to what Kelly said. It's an exceptionally good settlement. We do have forward indications of the following 2 years, which are, they're certainly nowhere near the settlement for 22-23, but they're better than our medium-term financial planning assumptions were at 3.5 and 2.4. So again, we're able to think of things perhaps over more than 1 year as well as we lead up to March. So it's an exceptionally good settlement. There's no other way to describe it, and we need to use it wisely for 22-23 and beyond. There's a real opportunity, I think, for local authorities to strengthen their resilience and secure the future of local services going forward in light of this settlement. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you to all members and officers for their hard work on this so far, especially over the Christmas and New Year period. I know with the draft budget coming out very, close to Christmas, and then I'll wish to discuss this week. That has sort of concertinaed discussions, conversations on Christmas Eve and between Christmas and New Year. And I appreciate people, taking time out of their Christmas periods to discuss these things. That's very welcome. I would like to welcome the investment that Welsh Government has made in local services and the recognition, I think, that lies behind that investment about the importance of local services, about the importance of partnership working, and very much continuing the spirit that we've worked in for the past 20 months over the pandemic, of working together and remembering that we serve the same people and have the same ambitions and priorities as we do that. That's very welcome from Welsh Government, as is the multi-year aspect of the settlement. They've been good to their word that when they had some multi-year information through the CSR at a UK level, they would give us that same advance warning in terms of future years. So I think that's very welcome as well. I'd also like to note that the in-year position is, partly thanks to the approach they've taken to the hardship fund and the way they've worked with us to overcome the inevitable turbulence that the pandemic and the pressures that the pandemic has caused. So that's very much one of the key reasons for the favourable in-year position as well, and that's to be welcomed. In very much welcoming that settlement, I would like to just echo the thoughts of Kelly and Nigel, really, that we can't forget the challenges that remain at this time. The pandemic pressures and the end of the hardship fund. Things aren't just going to go away all at once. There will be remaining pressures that I think we need to have a think about. I very much welcome the talk about the COVID recovery fund and how we can control and work with that to go forwards, for example, and how we can work with our partners to help ease our way out of the impacts of the pandemic. Also, I think we need to bear in mind the scars that will remain on services, both from the pandemic and from the austerity of the past decade, and those just don't go away overnight either. Very much welcome some of the policy aims that will have financial implications, like the living wage in social care. They're not the answer in and of themselves, but they are at least a start to recognising our need to work on that sector and on pay and anything that advances us towards the living wage, which we committed to internally as a council several years ago, but that we still have work to do with commission services. I think is very welcome, but does obviously cost money. I think the pay uncertainty is a point well made that we need to heed as members, and of course the need for us to try and keep council tax as low as possible in recognition of the rising costs that many households are facing at the moment, with things like heating bills going up and inflation impacting on food prices and other things as well. And just to very much try and use this to think long term, not just think short term. I think the temptation, especially given the place we are in the electoral cycle, would be for us to make short term decisions that might be popular in the short term, but might have implications for services in the longer term. I'd very much advise against that, as tempting as it may be sometimes. And in that same vein, to very much heed Nigel's advice that's given from a position of great experience and expertise on the use of reserves. I really think the need to think long term is a huge one. The need for us to try and switch as much as we can to investing in preventative and early intervention services. I think if we use this good settlement right, we can make real progress on those things. Whereas if we try and take the quick wins out of this and make short-term decisions, then I don't think we'll be able to make such progress for the long term. So I'd just like to thank everyone for their work on this, and just reiterate the benefit that we have in Wales of working alongside a Welsh government that values local services and that wants to work with us as a council to secure the future of those services. So thank you to everyone involved in that as well, and our special thanks to Mark and to Rebecca as Local Government Finance Minister, and to Julie as the outgoing Minister for their work with us as councils. It's certainly been a lot different to the experience my colleagues as leaders in England have had, the experience I've had working with Welsh Government in the last 2 years at a difficult time. Any questions or comments before we move to the recommendations on this report, colleagues? Dave Daniels.
Thank you, Leader. Only to point out the adult services underspend is, it's self-explanatory in the context, but I'll give it anyway, that it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing that we're underspending adult services, because essentially it's down to us being unable to commission care packages for people due to a chronic and acute problem with finding staff, quite frankly, in adult social care. And we've mentioned sustainability and prioritising a long-term vision for the future, and I think at the forefront of our thinking when it comes to that, I think is resolving this crisis, this chronic issue in adult social care, because I think it's only likely to get worse. It seems to have sustained over the winter period, unfortunately, and I don't think it's one of these things that will resolve itself on its own. So I'm just flagging this up again, because I think it's in my responsibility to do so at every opportunity. We've got a members' seminar tomorrow to appraise the members of the situation, because I think it's important to be open and honest about the situation. But I think we have an opportunity going forward to try. Obviously, finance is not the be-all and end-all of everything in this situation, but it's a significant lever that we can exercise. So I think that needs to be at the forefront of our thinking when it comes to long-term vision for this sort of windfall that we've fortunately and finally had after 10 years of not. So thank you for allowing me to speak on that.
Thanks, Dave. It's a very good point. Well made. It's a classic example of trying to think long term with the benefit of the settlement, and to really try and address that recruitment issue that's faced across the UK. I guess it's the other side of a positive balance, isn't it? There's good reasons for that, sort of the planning, the hardship fund, and there's the sort of the less good reasons in terms of recruitment issues that councils across the UK seem to be facing at the moment in getting people into domiciliary care, especially. And there are, as you say, there are long-term reasons behind that, as well as issues of the pandemic. And thank you for your strong voice in articulating that, and it's certainly a challenge that we should rise to as a council. Any other questions or comments? If not, are we happy to move to the recommendations? Okay, everyone in favour? Any objections? No. Any abstentions? No. Okay, that report's carried. Thanks, members. If we then move on to the item on housing adaptation policy amendment, and if I hand over initially to Dave Daniels.
Thank you, Leader. From that fairly gloomy contribution I had to give, I think this is essentially good news, which will hopefully mean that people needing small and medium adaptations to their homes will make them safer and more accessible without them necessarily worrying about the costs involved. So it's all written in the report, and I'm sure we have Keith Rutherford and Eunice Jones here today, so any questions I'm sure they can answer on detail. But basically, as contained in the report, Welsh Government last year set out that Welsh Government are removing means testing for small to medium and disability grants, DFGs to some people. We already had a threshold of 5,000. That threshold, we've found that due to a number of factors, such as, I mean, quite obviously the pandemic, I think probably Brexit has a part to play in it as well. We're finding that the costs of delivery for works has risen over a period of time, and that 5,000 threshold isn't necessarily fit for purpose at the moment. So this policy change is essentially to raise that threshold to 8,000 initially. You'll note in the report it says staggered, so we'll be monitoring the impact of this rise. It'll hopefully mean that more people will live safely and happily in their homes. So it's, from my perspective, and the perspective of the recipients, it's an overwhelmingly good policy change, I think. I think it's noted in the report that this will be retrospective to June this year, so those who've already received adaptations, it will impact on them too in a positive way. I think that's my part played, so I think any other questions, direct them my way, or I think it might be Keith presenting, or Eunice.
It's me, David.
Oh, thank you, Eunice.
That's okay. Well, again, not a lot to add to what David has said. Predominantly, when we received the letter from the then Welsh Government Minister of Housing and Local Government, there was Torfaen was ahead of the game by having such a scheme in place in the first place. And what we found that when things began to open back up, that as David has intimated, was that costs of building works had increased, and we were getting a number of what we would term small and medium-sized adaptations that were exceeding the 5,000 threshold by not a lot, but it was pushing people into the financial assessment. And once the financial assessment happened, they were declining the adaptation, and that has wider implications because obviously it's about our ability to keep people safe at home, but also, you know, intimating about the community crisis is that if they've got the correct equipment at home, then often that prolongs the independence and the requirement for care. So that's where we're at. So what we are suggesting is that we increase it to 8,000. We're looking to backdate the decision to the 1st of June 2000 last year, so 2021, predominantly because the OT assessments are still valid. We will, once this is communicated, we are anticipating that potentially there could be an increase in demand, but and that's why it's only a step in the right direction, and we will be monitoring the budget. And I've worked closely with finance colleagues within accountancy to understand the potential implications if all the people that declined decided that they wanted to go ahead, and also spoken to some of our contractors and things like that as well, because obviously that's another factor, is the ability to get the works up and running and done. And what we'll be looking at doing is potentially putting together groups of tenders so that builders can bid on a group of works. So say, for example, 6 stair lifts or level access showers or whatever, which gives them a bit more security. So that's all I've really got to add, unless there's anything anyone wants to ask.
Great, thanks Eunice, and thanks Dave for that introduction. Any questions on this report? Sounds like great news, and thanks for your work on this. If we move then to the recommendations, if everyone's happy to. The recommendations are at paragraph 8.1 to seek approval to amend Torfaen's housing adaptations policy to increase the non-means test value from 5,000 to 8,000 with effect from the 1st of June of last year. Is everyone happy to approve that? Any objections? Any abstentions? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you both for that. If we move on then to agenda item 8, which is the item on the community asset transfer Fishpond Park Panteg. Shall I hand over to Kelly or Victor first? Who wants to go first on this?
I'll just come in briefly if that's all right.
Thanks.
Thanks. I'll hand over to Victor now just to run through the technical aspects of the report. But I just wanted to say that I'm really supportive of this proposal. I think the community asset transfer, it'll empower the group to continue taking ownership of the park. The Friends was formed, I read in the report, in 2015 and have been actively working with the support of the council to improve the park for a number of years. And that hard work is so evident. I visit the park quite regularly and it really is a lovely place to visit. You can see the progress and the work that has taken place there. And like I said, their hard work is so evident and I'm sure much appreciated by its local community and is a real benefit to the community. So I'll hand over to Victor now to go through the detail, but I just wanted to say really that I'm really supportive of this proposal. I really look forward to seeing the park continue to flourish. So thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. The group that is behind the charity is quite well organized and energetic and tenacious, and they've done a lot of work. And essentially, what this community asset transfer is doing is not introducing something fundamentally new, because they have had the larger share of managing the park from day to day for the past 6 or 7 years. So what this does is empowers them more in terms of being able to access finances to invest in the park. The availability of the park to the public will remain as it has been, because that's a tricky area in terms of granting rights to a particular group when it is a public facility. But certainly the way the legal agreement will be structured will be such that there's no risk of anybody being excluded from accessing the park. What this is intending to achieve is this access to funds that will go into improving the facilities in the park, and most especially the pavilion building, which they've mentioned of improving the toilet facilities and the other elements that need to be improved. So, and you'll see in the report that there is a reasonably fair split of duties. So the council is still retaining some responsibilities over the park. It's not a case of abandoning the facility or offloading all responsibility, but there's a split so that the charity can handle what they feel comfortable and competent to manage, and what is perhaps a bit more onerous for them, the council will continue to manage in support of the community. So there is a fair balance, and getting to this position has taken quite a considerable period of negotiation, probably 2 years of discussing the fine details of how best this would work, but we're now in a position to progress subject to cabinet approval. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. Any questions or comments? Certainly, just want to reflect about that story. Thinking back, as David will remember as well, in 2015 when the group formed, that the park was a shadow of its former self, and the group's hard work has really had a huge benefit, both for the park and I think for bringing the community around the park together. And that's been the added benefit of the group getting together. And I'd just like to thank officers for for adapting to that new way of working, because it's not always easy to let go of control sometimes in return for the huge benefits to the community and I think to the council as well. And I know the demands on the property and the legal team are very high, so thank you for their hard work to get this done. Certainly it's something that's very much appreciated. Any other questions or comments before we move to the recommendations then? Okay, are we all happy to accept the recommendations of the report? Anyone opposed? Right, the report's carried then. Thank you very much, Victor, and thank you to Kelly as well for introducing that report. If we move on then to agenda item 9, which is the governance, policies and information management. If I hand over initially to David Joel, I believe. muted, Dave. Right, Dave? I can't hear you. Look, Linda, do you want to come in first? We've got Dave now. David?
Yeah, the camera isn't on. It'll stop shortly, I hope. There you go. There you are. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's a really bad echo. I don't know if there's another speaker near your computer or something. Or...
How about that?
That's a bit better.
It's not a deliberate.
Oh, mute again. Do you want to kick off, Lyndon, on this? Then we can bring David in afterwards.
Absolutely, leader. That's helpful.
Yeah, come in, Lyndon.
Yeah, okay. Good morning, Cabinet, and Happy New Year to you all. As you'd be aware, we brought quite a number of policies to you over the last 2 years, actually, in terms of widening and strengthening our information management framework. Today for Cabinet, you have before you the policy which is IGO 13, which is our records management policy, the details of which are set out in the appendix therein. As you know, as a council, we generate a whole mass of information that then become our corporate asset. We've had a number of very good internal audits supported by our audit colleagues who have helped us shape and look at how we can best manage our information in this management framework, hence the reason why we need this records management policy. Now the policy just outlines the areas that we'll go into in terms of the way in which we more efficiently manage and discharge our functions as a council. And in so doing so, we really do need to be aware of how we dispose of our records appropriately, efficiently, and how we remain compliant. The report, as Councillor Daniels mentioned just now, is short, really, just to bring into account to colleagues that this is just yet another policy that's coming in front of you for your view and approval. There will be others coming your way in time, but what this does do is keep the council in a very safe and secure, and really opens the ground for us to look at records management and indeed how we'll manage our records management in the future in an electronic way. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thanks, Lyndon. Any comments before we move to the recommendations here then? Oh, right, I think it's frozen there.
Hang about now, can you hear me?
That's better, we can hear you and there's no feedback now.
Well, it's rather pointless me going through the presentation or introduction, because effectively Lyndon has competently done the business, so I commend him on that. I'd just like to say that I know that Lyndon and the team have done a hell of a lot of work on this, so I'd like to congratulate them. And I would say this too. I haven't talked to Dave Daniels about the shortness of the report, but I would have said something like this. The shortness of my introduction reflects the shortness of the report in a sense, but we should never underestimate the impact that the content of this report has on the smooth running, smooth operation of our organisation. In this sense, the report and the content that it identifies punches way, way above its weight, and I commend Lyndon and the team for producing this.
Great, thanks both. Are we happy then to move to the recommendations and agree those? All in favour? Anyone against? No abstentions. That's carried unanimously. Thank you both for that. If we can move to agenda item 10 then, which is exclusion of press and public. The next item needs to be excluded for reasons as outlined in the report. Are we okay to finish the recording? Are we happy to agree that, colleagues? Everyone in favour? Anyone against that? No, that's carried.